Clean Cities is a 501c3 not-for-profit, and our goal really is to reduce dependence on imported oil here in northern Indiana. And so that involves working with different fleets, organizations on different types of alternative fuels and diesel emission reductions here throughout northern Indiana. We deal with electric, we deal with biodiesel, we deal with propane, we deal with compressed natural gas, we deal with liquefied natural gas, we deal with ethanol, E85, and I believe hybrid vehicles, and then we work, again, like I said, with a lot on diesel emission reductions. Well, the pros, you know, as Clean Cities, the focus of Clean Cities is we're fuel neutral, so we promote all of the alternatives, and so we're not prone to one over the other. But what we'd like to say is here at Clean Cities, there's a lot of opportunities as Americans for us to reduce our dependence, and so the advantages, all of the alternative fuels have advantages. Probably one of the disadvantages that you're going to see with electric vehicles right now is that there's not charging stations that are available, and that's something that we're working on with the Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission and NIPSCO to actually start that production and implementation of public charging stations. A lot with any of the alternative fuels, it's kind of like the chicken and the egg mentality, is where can you fuel those vehicles at? And so through collaboration with NERC and our communities and the local businesses, what we see is the opportunity really to kind of place those fueling stations in public-private types of partnerships, and we're just starting to come out with a couple of those that we'll talk about later. Well, there's a lot of differences between propane. Propane really, you know, with the different classes of vehicles that we have on the road, propane is really propane is the most widely used alternative fuel in the world. Currently, with the different types of OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, they're making these propane vehicles across the world. And now they're starting just to come to fruition where they're actually produced here in the United States, and you're going to see a lot more propane vehicles coming into action. Propane can deal with vehicles anywhere from a light-duty vehicle, which would be our passenger vehicles, all the way up to like a class 4 to 5 vehicle, which would be like a box truck. Usually with compressed natural gas, what you're going to see is it works very well for organizations that have fleets that they can actually fuel in one location, so a fleet that goes out and then they come back at night. Actually the natural gas applications work on heavier duty cycle engines. So your garbage trucks are perfect applications for that. You're starting to see a lot more over-the-road trucks starting to use more of the liquefied natural gas in their applications, but it all comes back right now to our fueling mechanisms to allow that. So locally here, you're going to see City of LaPorte is actually using propane vans to transport individuals to and from different locations throughout the City of LaPorte and surrounding communities. You also see the Indiana Dunes National Park begin the conversion of a lot of their buses to propane. And then there's several of our local school corporations that are starting the applications to start running their school buses on propane. And so with that, and then with more on the compressed natural gas aspects, usually the infrastructure cost is pretty extensive for a compressed natural gas station, and it's not so much the cost of the gas is there, because usually it's transported through the pipe, so like anyone that has a heat in their home would have access to natural gas, but depending on the size of that volume of compressed natural gas that's available, that's how they would usually size the station for that. But some of the times the stations actually cost anywhere from about $500,000 to over close to $2 million. And so that's been the impeding factor here in northern Indiana, is how do we get fueling stations to fuel more vehicles with compressed natural gas, while propane, a lot of times what you're going to see is anybody that has access to propane, that the propane that we use to not only heat our homes but to cook on our grills is the same kind of propane that fuels our vehicles. And so any place like a U-Haul station or anybody that offers refueling of propane tanks, you can probably fill your car there. So again, there's probably about in our area in Northwest Indiana, Lake LaPorte, Porter County, there would probably be about 25 local propane stations that are publicly accessible, and I think that number is probably going to double before the end of the calendar year here. And then we are planning on opening the first public-private partner compressed natural gas station here in Gary, Indiana, later this fall. The most readily available alternative fuel that we see in regards to stations will probably be ethanol, E85 stations. When we started, there's currently about 122 stations that are scattered throughout Indiana. In our area, we have, I think, about 57 in Lake LaPorte and Porter counties that are available. So any flexible fuel vehicle that can run on E85 would have access to this fuel. The most efficient fuel to manufacture, again, there's a variety of calculations that you'd have to make, determining what your drive cycle costs are. So that that's really a kind of an open-ended question, because I would say, based on your return on investment, we're seeing with our electric rates being so cheap here in Indiana that we're seeing people that are driving electric vehicles basically for nothing. I mean, currently the programs that we have available for electric vehicles is that you can fuel your vehicle between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. for free. So if you work within say a 50 to 75 mile range of home, which most of us do as citizens of the United States, to drive an electric vehicle in Northwest Indiana or Northern Indiana actually would be very inexpensive. So currently here in Northwest Indiana, I would have to say that anywhere from return on investment for an electric vehicle, basically we're running a free electric charge, so it doesn't cost you anything for that electric car. Well, biodiesel is obviously made out of different feedstocks. Being an agricultural state, for both ethanol and biodiesel, what we're seeing is biodiesel here in Indiana is mainly made out of soybeans, and Indiana is actually the fourth largest producer of soybeans in the nation. And so, working with our farming industry and the different producers of biodiesel, we've actually seen quite a big increase. In 2012, our area actually showed the biggest increase in biodiesel usage in the United States. And so with that, we've been working with our various industry here in northern Indiana, and a lot of the heavy industry has actually been using biodiesel for the last 2 years, which has helped with our air quality issues, but it's also obviously reduced our dependence on imported oil. With ethanol, again, I think we're the third largest corn producing state in the United States, and there's been a lot of controversy with ethanol, but there's a lot of misnomers with ethanol, and that's one of the things that we try to do is teach people on the benefits of ethanol and how it is produced by corn. But and there's different types of feedstocks that are actually being used to produce ethanol, and like we're on the second, almost the third generation of ethanol and actually biodiesel. So a lot of this thing is it's not taking food out of people's mouths. And but what we've seen with ethanol, all of our gas here in Indiana and the majority of the United States contains at least 10% ethanol. So there's ethanol is being used pretty much by anybody that burns conventional gas. So if you go to the gas station, if you look at the pump, you'll see that there's anywhere from a variation from 10%, sometimes up to 15%. And so a lot of states are actually moving towards 15% ethanol. And ethanol is renewable, just like biodiesel. And what we've seen is it's obviously helped not only with air quality here in Northwest Indiana, but it's helped reduce our dependence on imported oil throughout the United States. Well, I think it's quite a few things. Is that we're spending literally about $700 billion a year, and that number varies from who you talk to, but a lot of that money is going overseas to people that potentially do not like the United States. So anytime that we're dependent on a foreign entity for oil, we feel like anything that we can do to reduce that dependence is not only going to help with keeping that money here in the United States, helping keep that money here in Indiana, reducing our debt to foreign nations is going to help the United States become stronger and more economic development. Well, I would say probably natural gas. So hydrogen is probably the biggest, but right now there's not a lot of OEMs that are actually producing hydrogen vehicles, and I would say that we'll start seeing more hydrogen vehicles probably within the next 5 to 7 years because there's been a lot more speculation and improvements in technology with hydrogen. But hydrogen being the cleanest liquefied natural gas, compressed natural gas, propane, and diesel. Again, I think what we will always have diesel. We'll always have gasoline. There's been major improvements, and we can't always just put air quality benefits back towards these alternative fuels. Clean diesel vehicles are probably almost as efficient as any of these alternative fuel vehicles that we've talked about. So, we're a big proponent of people when they can afford to purchase new vehicles and meeting these various EPA regulations, that the clean diesel vehicles are very, very fuel efficient and they're very, very clean. Hydrogen is the future. What we see, hydrogen will be the future. But I would definitely say that there is room for all these fuels that we've discussed today. All these fuels, we will never be, I shouldn't say never because never is a long time, but I would say that we will always have gasoline, we will always have diesel. But when we talk about a lot of these alternative fuels, we're talking maybe 2 to 5% of the total fossil fuel usage right now. I mean, we've seen huge improvements in a short period, but there is such big room for improvement. And I think you'll see constant technology advantages coming to fruition. The CAFE standards for our cars are improving. We're going to see cars getting anywhere from 50 to 60 to 70 miles per gallon in the very near future. And again, I think just by some of the programs working with NERC on really being green and reducing idling time, those are ways that we as Americans, as Hoosiers, can actually reduce our dependence on imported oil also. I think someday, potentially, maybe not in my lifetime, but I think someday, gasoline, diesel has been around for, since the turns of the centuries, and electric cars were actually around. One of the first cars was an electric car. Mm-hmm. So I definitely think that with the progress that we're making with technology, 50 years ago we never talked about the internet. So I think with some of the great institutions that we have here throughout the United States and throughout the world, that we'll definitely get to a point where we might become energy independent. And I'd say never, but I think there's definitely a lot of room for growth. And again, I wouldn't rate one technology over the other because there's different drive cycles that trucks have over different fleets. But as Americans, we want choice, and that's all we're trying to do is provide choice and educate people on those choices. Education. I think part of the things that we work on with NERC, that we work on with a lot of our different partners, is it's just a lack of education, and it's changed. I think and from regards to credibility, is if I have to drive a car and it's inconvenient for me to be able to fuel that car, I'm probably not going to drive that car. And as Americans, we want convenience, and so we, the alternative fuel energy, it has to be convenient for us and for Americans. And I think what you're going to see is with some of the education that our kids are getting in the school, they're more prone to drive electric vehicles, these alternative fuel vehicles. I think the reluctance has been on us as maybe the older generations, that people have just not been educated. There's just been a lot of change that's been going on with all these technologies. But again, I think we'll continue to see these changes in technology and improving technologies. I think one of the big things is to do your research, and I would use South Shore Clean Cities to do that research. I mean, we have a variety of tools that are available on our website that people can actually go to compare all the new models, all the existing models that are out there. And the idea really would be is to making sure that one, that you have capacity, that it meets your driving habits, your driving needs, but then also fueling infrastructure would be one of the things. But then a lot of the things that we're seeing is that there's a lot of tax advantages currently for people that want to move to alternative fuels, and so it's got to make financial sense. I mean, for someone, for a family that has a that we don't have access to mass transportation, you need to have a vehicle that suits the driving needs of your family. Definitely utilize our website, southshorecleancities.org. Pardon me, as a resource, and then the AFDC website, which is the alternative fuel data. What is that? ADFC. AFDC.energy.gov. And then there's a tool that's actually available there for you to utilize to compare the different alternative fuels. But again, I think utilizing NERC, utilizing us as a resource. We see a lot of new technologies that are coming to fruition here locally, and so part of our role with NERC really is to get some of these technologies in the hands of our local leaders, and I think people want to see these vehicles in action. And so the best thing is don't be scared by change, and I think once you would drive one of these vehicles, you'll see that they're not as inefficient or uncomfortable as we might think them to be. I think we've been we've made tremendous progress, working with our local leaders here in northern Indiana. I think, a lot of times we don't really get credit, our area in northern Indiana, getting credit really for some of the accomplishments that we've had. By no means that we're at a place where we're energy independent, but I think a lot of our major industry has already made the change to alternative fuels. We're beginning to implement other aspects, working with some of the improvements that we've seen here locally with British Petroleum, with BP. It's not only helped the environment, but it's going to help with some of the dependence on imported oil. So I think it's us, working together as one unit, and I think by utilizing the talents and the services that we have with the Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Council, is that we're here to serve and help with those situations, and all I would ask is that we work together.